What's up, everybody? You are back with TTBurger Game Reviews here on YouTube, and I'm your host, Tony. We are wrapping things up with my Final Fantasy franchise review, episode 302, part 10 of 10 big parts. Last time I took a look at Lightning Returns Final Fantasy 13, which wrapped up the trilogy of Final Fantasy 13. I gave it a 7.5 out of 10 because there were some new changes that were added to the game that I was not a fan of, but people could like it depending on what kind of person they are. Me, I thought the game could have been better, but still a good Final Fantasy game, worthy of a 7.5 out of 10. Today we're going to zoom ahead to the year 2016. This was about 2 years after the PlayStation 4 was out, actually a little over 2 years per se. We got this for the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, Final Fantasy 15. Yeah, there's no Final Fantasy 14 because we know that was a MMO, which was terrible. But we're going to look at this one here, which has new gameplay elements, open world environments and everything. How does it turn out? Well, we're going to find out right now. Alright, my dedicated fans, welcome to the grand finale of our extensive review series on the beloved Final Fantasy franchise. In the previous installment, Part 9, we ventured into the dawn of the PlayStation 4 era, witnessing how the series began to adapt and evolve for a new generation of gaming, setting the stage for what was to come. The industry was shifting, and Final Fantasy seemed poised to shift with it. Now, for our 10th and final part, we turn our gaze to one of the most anticipated, perhaps most divisive entries in the recent memory of Final Fantasy 15. This ambitious title, released on November 29th, 2016, sought to breathe new life into the series by embracing an open-world design and action-oriented combat system, drawing comparisons to contemporary successes like Nier. The anticipation for Final Fantasy 15 was immense, building over a decade of development under the various guises, famously beginning as Final Fantasy Versus 13 before its dramatic rebranding. This protracted development cycle burdened the game with colossal expectations, promising a grand adventure that would redefine the series for a modern audience while retaining its signature emotional depth and narrative grandeur. The question wasn't just whether it'd be good, but whether it could live up to the weight of its own legacy and the hype it had generated. Throughout this journey, we've celebrated the triumphs of numerous Final Fantasy games, acknowledging their successes while also noting where some shone brighter than others, demonstrating the series' diverse strengths across various eras and console generations. As we draw to a close, the pivotal question remains: what is my ultimate assessment of Final Fantasy 15? To be entirely frank, Final Fantasy 15 did not resonate with me as strong as I'd hoped. While it undeniably possesses elements of merit and is far from a terrible game, a series of significant issues persistently hampered my enjoyment and ultimately the overall experience, preventing it from reaching the lofty heights of its predecessors and the potential that its premise clearly held. Final Fantasy 15 introduced a real-time action combat system, a significant departure from the series' traditional turn-based or active time battle mechanics that long defined its strategic identity. This shift aimed for dynamic, fast-paced engagement, and visually it delivered with flashy warp strikes, explosive elemental magic, and dynamic character animations. However, beneath this polished exterior, the combat often felt chaotic and surprisingly lacked strategic depth. The camera in particular frequently struggled in close quarters or against larger multi-limbed enemies, leading to frustrating moments where the action was obscured by visual clutter and environmental elements, or simply poor framing, turning intense battles into confusing blurs. The signature warp strike mechanic, while initially exciting and visually striking for its teleporting attacks, quickly became repetitive as a primary means of engagement, really evolving beyond its initial utility. Many encounters began to feel monotonous, as optimal strategy often boiled down to spamming the attack button and warping away to heal. Furthermore, the reliance on AI companions who controlled Gladio, Ignis, and Prompto often meant relying on their often questionable decision-making and unpredictable actions rather than directly controlling a cohesive player-driven party. There were countless instances where companions would fail to revive, not just promptly, ignore critical enemy weaknesses, or position themselves poorly in dangerous AoE zones, diminishing the sense of player agency and strategic control in critical moments. The command system offered some limited control over their unique abilities, but it felt like a band-aid rather than a federal solution to its AI inconsistencies. The absence of deep product customization beyond assigning basic weapons and accessories and distinct character roles also left much to be desired for a long-time Final Fantasy player. Unlike earlier titles where carefully constructed party compositions, intricate skill trees like, the Sphere Grid from Final Fantasy X, and strategic ability allocations such as Final Fantasy VII's Materia system or Final Fantasy XII's Gambit system, were paramount to success and offered immense player freedom. Final Fantasy XV's combat felt more like a flashy hack and slash with severe limited tactical options. Magic 2 was simplified to rudimentary system primarily confined to elemental flasks with a broad area of effect damage. This simplification removed the nuanced technical application and strategic importance seen in previous iterations, often feeling more like a novelty or a basic crowd control tool than a core combat pillar, further stripping away layers of strategic depth. The transition to an open world was a bold move for the series, intended to offer players unprecedented freedom and a sense of boundless adventure in the vast world of Eos. However, the execution felt largely disjointed, remarkably uninspired, and surprisingly restricted for an open experience. The initial areas like the sun-baked plains of Lead and the marshlands of Duske, while initially beautiful and inviting, quickly gave way to the vast empty stretches that served more as glorified corridors between quest markers than engaging landscapes teeming with discovery. There was a distinct lack of organic emergent gameplay or truly interesting landmarks to stumble upon, but side quests frequently devolved into mundane fetch quests, like example collecting frog parts, retrieving specific minerals from a cave, or repetitive monster hunts with little narrative weight or meaningful impact on the world, failing to create a truly vibrant interactive world that felt lived in and responsive to the player's actions. Traveling could be excessively cumbersome, relying primarily on Regalia, the iconic royal car. While stylish and central thematic element of the road trip, it was inexplicably restricted to designated roads for the vast majority of the game. Only inflict abilities very late as a clunky, very frustrating, often post-game addition. The constant adherence to roads coupled with required manual refueling and frequent random enemy encounters, especially at night, made exploration often feel less like discovery, more like a tedious, often interrupted commute. The sheer emptiness, particularly in the sprawling northern regions and later linear segments, sometimes made the world feel less alive and more like a static backdrop for linear quest lines, masquerading as open world exploration. This contradictory design choice as an open world that consistently funneled you down predetermined paths and offered little reward for genuine exploration, fundamentally undermined the promise of true freedom and emergent gameplay, leading to an overall feeling of missed opportunity and a world that prioritized visual spectacle over interactive depth. The narrative of Final Fantasy XV is perhaps its most contentious aspect, a sprawling tale of destiny, sacrifice, and friendship that ultimately struggled profoundly with its presentation and pacing. The core premise, a prince reclaiming his throne after a devastating invasion that shatters his world, is inherently compelling, filled with potential for epic drama and emotional depth. However, its delivery suffered from significant pacing issues and a heavily fragmented storytelling approach. Crucial plot points, backstories for key characters like Lunafria, or even the motivations of pivotal antagonists like Arden were alarmingly often relegated to external media. The Kingsglaive film, for instance, contained vital information about the initial invasion of Insomnia and the fates of key characters like King Regis, making the game's opening hours feel disconnected without prior viewing. Similarly, the Brotherhood anime provided much needed character development for Noctis companions, fleshing out their personalities and bond inside of the game itself. The reliance on the supplementing materials left players who only experienced the main game feeling a profound and frustrating sense of incompetentness, as its entire essential chapters of the story were missing from the core experience, significantly hindering emotional investment in critical moments. While the bond between Noctis and his companions, Ignis, Gladio, and Prompto, was generally heartwarming and stands as a true highlight of the game, consistently delivering authentic moments of camaraderie, banter, and emotional weight that were often the sole reason to press on, the border narrative lacked the epic scope and emotional payoff characteristics of the series' strongest entries. Key attacks such as Arden were memorable in concept of possessing a charismatic malevolence felt severely underdeveloped in their motivations and overall presence within the main storyline of the game itself, reducing their impact from truly formidable foes to mere plot devices whose true depth was only explored in post-launch DLC that many players never experienced. The world's lore, rich with mythological and political intrigue, including the history of the Astrals, the ongoing war between Lucis and Niflheim, and the origin of the Star Scourge, was often poorly integrated into the main plot, leaving many fascinating concepts hinted at but never fully explored or explained within the game itself, contributing a persistent sense of a rushed or unfinished narrative. Even the poignant final chapters, while emotionally impactful, felt somewhat unearned given the preceding narrative inconsistencies and underdeveloped world building. Upon its initial release, Final Fantasy XV struggled with noticeable and persistent technical issues which significantly marred the immersion for many players. These included persistent frame rate drops, particularly in busy combat scenarios or densely populated areas, making the action feel sluggish and unresponsive and detracting from the supposed fluidity of the new combat system. Aggressive pop-in was a constant distraction where environmental details, distant objects, and even enemies would visually appear out of nowhere as the player approached, reportedly breaking the illusion of a cohesive and fully rendered world. Occasional bugs such as characters getting stuck in environments, requiring a reload, collision detection issues, physics glitches causing objects to behave erratically, or awkward character animations in non-combat scenarios further disrupted the fluidity and pulse of the experience. These pervasive technical shortcomings pointed to a development cycle that may have been heavily rushed or mismanaged, leaving the game feeling an unpolished and unrefined way in far too many areas for a AAA release. While post-launch patches and numerous content updates including additional story chapters and character episodes attempted to address some of these problems that fill narrative gaps, they couldn't entirely erase the initial impression of an experience that felt fundamentally incomplete or hastily assembled at launch. The sheer volume and necessity of these retroactive fixes underscore the game's problematic initial state and its failure to deliver a truly robust and positive experience from day one. Players were essentially asked to buy into an evolving product with the complete experience arriving long after its initial release. In conclusion, Final Fantasy XV represents a pivotal yet ultimately deeply flawed turning point of the Final Fantasy series. It bravely dared to innovate, embracing modern gameplay trends and a more contemporary narrative style focused intimately on the core group of the protagonists rather than a sprawling ensemble. The undeniable bond between Noctis, Ignis, Gladio, and Prompto is without question its greatest strength. It fosters moments of genuine warmth, humor, and camaraderie that truly resonates, serving as a powerful emotional anchor of the entire journey, providing a much-needed human touch that distinguishes it. However, the game's ambitious vision was ultimately undermined by an inconsistent open world which often felt expansive but empty, lacking the engaging density and meaningful activities found in more robust open world titles. Additionally, a severely fragmented story heavily reliant on external media to be fully understood, and a combat system that, while visually striking, often lacked the strategic depth and technical nuances experienced from the franchise, collectively contributed to an experience that felt fundamentally incomplete, rushed, and less polished than it should have been for the title of this pedigree. While it introduced bold ideas and new directions for the beloved series, its execution ultimately left me with a pervasive sense of unfulfilled potential and a longing for a more cohesive, self-contained, and thoroughly realized adventure that truly lives up to the reverbed Final Fantasy legacy. Before we can give this game a score here, let's go to our TTBurger positives and negatives. For the TTBurger positives, there's a strong character bond, the camaraderie and the relationship between Noctis, Ace, and Gladio, and Prompto are exceptionally well developed and serve as the emotional heart of the game, making their journey together as a genuine highlight. Visually stunning world and graphics, EOS is a beautifully rendered world with impressive environmental details, realistic lighting, and detailed character models that showcase the power of the PlayStation 4. The monster designs are also generally excellent and imaginative. Unique road trip atmosphere. The concept of a modern fantasy road trip with your friends is charming, provides many memorable slice-of-life moments and quiet character interactions that set it apart. Engaging music. The orchestral soundtrack is consistently beautiful and fitting, enhancing both moments of grand exploration and intense combat with memorable and emotional resonant themes. Post-launch content, DLC, while necessary, the subsequent DLC episodes and updates did attempt to address some narrative gaps and character backstories, offering a more complete picture for those who invested further. Now for the TTBurger negatives. Fragmented and incomplete storytelling. The main narrative heavily relies on external media like film, anime, and paid DLC to fully understood, leaving significant gap and lack of emotional payoff within the core's game plot and character motivations. Shallow and repetitive combat system. While flashy, the real-time combat lacks the strategic depth and technical options that typically associated with Final Fantasy, often devoting into repetitive button mashing with an unreliable camera that hinders visibility. Empty and disjointed open worlds. The open world, particularly in its initial segments, feels vast but largely empty, filled with repetitive side quests and offering limited meaningful exploration or engaging content outside of the main critical path. Technical issues at launch. The game suffered from noticeable performance problems upon release, including persistent frame rate drops, aggressive popping, and various bugs which significantly detracted from the overall immersion and polish. Underdeveloped antagonists and poor lore integration. Key villains often lack sufficient development within the main game's narrative, and the rich complex lore of EOS is frequently poorly integrated or explained, leaving many intriguing concepts unexplored. Forced linearity in later chapters. Despite its open world aspiration, the latter half of the game becomes surprisingly and jarringly linear, feeling rushed and constraining and abandoning the initial sense of freedom established earlier. And finally, limited party customization. The absence of traditional job systems, extensive skill trees, or deep character build options limits player agency and strategic variety compared to other Final Fantasy titles. And that's what I gotta say about Final Fantasy 15. It could have been better. I understand they tried, but it could have been better, is what I'm saying. So what's the score that I give Final Fantasy 15? So yeah, in conclusion here, I can only give this game a score of a 4 out of 10. I know it's pretty low, but you have to understand where I'm coming from here. This game did not really settle well with me, and I understand if people like it. That's your opinion. I respect your opinion, but my opinion is this game was not very good. And that's what I gotta say about Final Fantasy 15. And we have done it, everybody. We have wrapped up the Final Fantasy series review here on my channel. I know it took a long time, but I had some stuff going on in my personal life that I had to take care of. But I think we did a good job, everybody. Episode 303 will be up next. What will we cover? You'll have to find out. Pretty much all I gotta say is this is Tony. Peacing out. Have a good day, and thank you all for watching my Final Fantasy series review. Episode 303 will be next. Stay tuned for that. Take care, everybody.
heroes so bold, from dusk to break of dawn.